All right, how's everybody doing? Awesome. So about a year ago, I decided to start my own team. And as a team lead, juggling numerous roles in my team, also working with Ylopo to assist clients, I got really swamped. It was really overwhelming. And my challenge was, how do I get back most of my time, right? And automations were the way I did this. So let me share with you a quick little success story. In March, we had a lead register in our system. Raya started talking to that lead, and the person said, I have to upgrade stuff in my house. My budget's going to kind of depend on that. And Raya said, hey, can you give me your property address so we can pull some data? She replied with the address. Automation fired off, let me know that. I sent it over to one of my agents. They called the lead, booked the appointment. Fast forward to 2 months later, we just closed that deal. It was 1.2 million on the list side and 1.2 on the buy side. So 2.4 in volume in just 2 months off of one lead. And without an automation, I might not have seen that. I was able to scale my team to 150 transactions in our first year. This year, we're tracking over 200. This is really just by using Ylopo and FollowPos as the core backbone of our tech stack. So in this session, we're going to talk about what automations are. We're going to go through the basics of how to set one up, talk about how they help our businesses grow, and I'm also going to share 3 of my favorite automations that help me save time in my day-to-day. So before I jump into this, just kind of curious, how many of you guys are currently using automations at a high level, would you say? Okay, we got a few of you. And how many of you guys kind of have a rough idea of what automations are, but the thought of setting them up is kind of overwhelming? And how many of you guys are like, auto what? You've never heard of an automation before. So for me, the purpose of an automation is to simplify anything I do multiple times. So if I do something more than once, I want to automate it. If I have something that takes 4 or 5 steps, I want to find a way to have one click do all those steps, right? Anything that makes workflows easier for my team, so something as simple as changing a stage that's going to fire off automations and fire off action plans. Also, anything that you often forget to do, maybe lead auditing, right? You can automate a lot of that process, and that's going to save you time. So to create an automation, it's really as easy as 1, 2, 3. There's 3 steps to an automation. Anybody know what the first step is to an automation? The trigger. That's what fires off the automation. Anyone know step 2? Step 2 is the condition. That's basically your filter. And what's step 3? Step 3 is the action. So that's what happens as a result of your trigger and your condition. So let's go through those and let's talk about each one. Let's really break it down. So step 1 is the trigger. And that's what starts your automation. And a trigger can be one or multiple of these things. It could be a stage change. So for example, you move a lead into a nurture stage and it fires off a nurture action plan. It could be a tag. It could be the deal stage got changed. So maybe the deal stage got changed to pending and you set the lead stage to pending. It could also be a calendar date. So birthday anniversaries, home anniversaries, anything like that. Also website activity. So a property view, a property save. Any of these things can trigger the automation. But really important to make sure that we use conditions, because conditions are your filters, right? So without the filter, like if I have a tag that triggers an automation, it's going to get triggered for everybody in my database. So you want to make sure you have filters, and they can include or exclude all different criteria. A few of the ones that I use are ponds, for example. So there's some automations where I only want them to fire off for leads that are in my ponds. I don't want them to fire off on my agents' personal leads. Last communication, right? So like if a lead hasn't been talked to in X amount of days, then the automation can fire off. Last visit to the website, you can do it by agent assigned. Pretty much anything you can filter your smart list by, you can have as a condition on your automation filter. So there's a bunch of them. These are just the main ones that I like to use. And that's like one of the most important parts of setting up your automation, is to make sure you have a condition. Step 3 is the action. So for the action, you can do one or multiple of these things. You can reassign the lead. So it could be reassign it to an agent, reassign it to a pond, or to like a first to claim group, for example. You can also add a note. And with that note, you can notify the assigned agent. So even if you're a single agent and you have an automation set up and you have it add a note and notify the assigned agent, it will still email you and tell you, hey, this event happened in your system. So I'll talk about that in one of my examples here in a minute. And then you can also fire off an action plan with the automation. So, we're all generating leads online, right? How many of you guys have ever called a lead? It's a bad number. They say wrong number, right? What do we typically do? What are some of the steps that we do when we have a bad phone number? For me, there's about 4. Mark it as a bad number, right? So put that bad underscore phone tag on. So let's talk about that for a second. So the bad phone tag or the bad underscore number tag in Follow Up Us, when you tag that lead with that tag, it tells Ylopo it's a bad number. So if that person ever clicks to come back to your site, this big box pops up, right? And it basically says, hey, can you put a phone number in before I let you look at more properties? So super important to make sure you're tagging your leads with that. What else do we do? For me, I want to move that stage to contact, right? Because I want to know, hey, I tried to talk to this person, but it wasn't really anything right now. It was a bad number. Another thing I want to do, I want to move that person into a pond because I want to get it out of my active pond. I also want to start that wrong phone number action plan, right? So it sends out a series of emails to get engagement. For me, that action plan gets a ton of engagement. Because if you're using the Ylopo wrong phone one, it has these catchy subject lines, right? That somebody's going to click and they're going to open it. Another thing I do too, I'll mark a lead with bad underscore phone. I'll hit it with like a push listing or something to get them to come back to the site to prompt another number, right? So what if I told you there was a way to do these 4 or 5 steps that you're doing with 1 click, right? So think about if this takes you 20 or 30 seconds per lead to do. If it doesn't seem like a lot of time, right? But if you're doing this multiple times a day, multiple times a week, it compounds, right? So by doing this, you're getting back more of your time. So on my team, what I did was I created a stage. It's not really a stage, but it's called bad phone number, right? So if the agent has a bad phone number, they put it into stage, bad phone number. This applies to all the leads in my system, so I don't have a condition on this one. If you wanted to, you could do like a condition for the pond, so it would only apply to leads in your pond or something like that. And then my action is I'm reassigning it to like my storage pond or my archive pond, so it goes away, gets added to the active pipeline. And then I'm starting the Ylopo wrong phone drip, but I made a couple edits to that phone drip, right? So that wrong phone drip, the first step is just immediately changing the stage to contact, right? It's also adding that bad phone tag, and then it's sending out emails to get engagement. So, with me, with my team, my philosophy is kind of like, if you're setting up workflows for your team, it has to be 1 click, or it's going to be really hard to get the agents to do it, right? Or to get them to consistently follow that process. So for me, by creating this stage, all they got to do is click stage, bad phone number, hit the little green check button, and the system does everything else for you. So now let's say you do this, right? An email goes out, somebody puts in a new phone number, that lead gets tagged with new underscore number. So you can set up an automation with that tag as a trigger, right? So a lead comes in, they put a new phone number, and that's going to be the trigger for your automation. And with that, what you could do is you could either add a note to the lead, basically saying like, hey, this lead put a new number in, give them a call. You can reassign that lead back to your active pond. You can notify the agent assigned. You can do multiple different things with this automation, but it helps create more visibility, right? Because now if somebody comes back, they put a new phone number in, it's going to send out all these different notifications and you're going to be notified of it. So for me, by using just these 2 automations alone, I've been able to resurface a lot of potentially missed opportunities. And that's what it looks like within Follow Up Us. So if you have that note added, it puts a note right on the lead, and then also in your little notification bell on the top right of your Follow Up Us, it'll show you that notification. So next one is lead activity, right? So how many of you guys have ever had a lead that's sitting in a pond? It comes back to your website, and let's say they click on a property, they favorite a property. Maybe you haven't talked to them in 5 days, 7 days, right? and it got missed, right? It was just sitting in your smart list, and maybe you didn't see it. So this automation, what it does is it allows less leads to slip through the cracks because it's sending out an email that's using the merge field, so the lead's activity, with clickable links to get them to come back to your site. So this automation is the trigger is a property view or a property saved. I'm using a pond condition on this one, so it's only applying to leads in my active lead pond, my Shark Tank, anything like that, right? And then the action plan is basically an are you still looking action plan. So it's sending out an email. It's using the last 5 preview merge field. Has anybody ever used the last 5 preview? Awesome. It's a really great merge field. Basically what it does is it takes the last 5 properties they looked at on your website and it puts them into an email as a clickable link, right? So the photos, the description. So if somebody gets that email and they click it, they actually are going to come back to your website. So it looks like this. So basically it says, hey, are you still looking in the last viewed address area? I found a few properties that might work for you. Do you have 5 minutes for a call? And it's plugging in the last 5 previews. So as you can see there on the right side, that's what the last 5 preview looks like, right? It's basically pulling out the 5 properties that person looked at and putting them into that email, right? So if you were the client and you got an email with an address that you might have looked at a couple days ago with your last 5, you're going to be like, hey, wow, this person's going and handpicking properties for me, right? So this is a really, really great automation to just help increase engagement and make sure that less leads slip through the cracks. And then next one, how many of you guys have ever had a lead come into your system and maybe you're a single agent, you're out doing showings, maybe you forgot to give that person a call, or how many of our team leads out there have leads? They go first to claim, right? Or round robin, they go to an agent. Maybe the agent's busy, right? They forget to follow up with that lead. Wouldn't you want a nice way to kind of move that opportunity to another agent or to notify you like, hey, did you follow up on this person? So that's what this automation is going to do. So the tag on or the trigger on this one is a tag, right? And the tag is basically lead check. So on my team, a lot of my seller leads go directly to agents as first to claim. So what I do is I add a tag called seller lead check. And then the system is going to run, when that tag gets added, it's going to run 2 conditions. And the condition is going to be calls made less than 1, and the stage is still in lead stage, right? So if that lead comes in, it gets that tag on it, it hasn't been called and the stage hasn't changed, it's going to reassign that lead over to my pond. This way any of my agents can call that lead, right? So if you're a single agent, you could use an automation like this. All you would do is just, instead of reassign, you would add a note. And that note could be like, hey, did you give this lead a call? And if you click on notify assigned agent, the system will basically email you and tell you, right, hey, you missed this lead. So the one thing with follow-up loss is that if you're doing this in an action plan, you would have to apply the tag on day 2 of the action plan. If you're using Zapier though, which is what I do, I have a new lead come in. If it meets the lead source requirement, I basically add that tag after 2 hours. So agent claims a lead, they have about 2 hours to call that lead. If they don't, it goes back into a pond for somebody else to get that opportunity. And I find that works really, really well. A couple other really great uses for automations, and I'll share these with all you guys at the end. I'm going to share with you guys all my automations. Raya replies, right? So let's say Raya's talking to a lead. It gets tagged AI needs follow-up, right? Maybe that lead's in one of your ponds. A lot of times what happens, that lead's sitting in the smart list, right? So unless an agent's sitting there looking at the smart list right away, they might miss that opportunity, right? So the way I have mine set up is if a lead gets tagged with AI needs follow-up, if they're sitting in one of my ponds, they go out to a first to claim group, so an agent can actually grab that lead and take it over right away. So that's kind of what happened with the story I told in the beginning about that lead that was 2.4 in volume. It was an AI needs follow-up that got sent to a first to claim group. The agent grabbed it, jumped on it, and that's how it went. Next one is Raya Voice, right? So with Raya Voice, we all focus on those live transfers, right? But one thing Raya Voice also does is they identify a lot of nurtures in our system, right? Sometimes Raya Voice calls a lead 8, 9, 10 times. On the 11th call, it actually talks to that lead, right? It finds out, hey, it's a real person. They have some kind of intent. But maybe they just didn't want to talk to an agent right away, right? So on my team, what we're doing is if somebody gets marked as a nurture from Raya Voice, we're sending it to a first to claim group. Agents claiming it, we're calling that lead up, basically saying, hey, you were talking to my ISA. They let me know you're not quite ready yet, but what had you looking? And then we're trying to set up a in-office buyer's consult or a strategy session with that person, right? And what I'm finding is by calling these nurtures, there's a lot of opportunity in there. We've booked a ton of appointments off of just those Raya Voice nurtures. Also, missed transfers. You can send the missed transfers to a first to claim as well. Couple other great uses for automations. Someone's birthday's coming up, right? You could have the system send them an email. You could have the system send you a task a couple days before if you want to be more personal and send them a handwritten note or something. Home anniversary, right? Maybe a year after you close, you want to send them a home anniversary thing. A stage change. Move a stage to nurture or cold. It puts them on a long-term action plan. Another thing you can do is you can use a tag to start another action plan, right? So let's say we have a new lead come in. We put them on the Ylopo Realtor email drip, for example, and they run through that drip campaign, and they haven't answered yet. At the end of that campaign, you can throw a tag onto that lead. So for example, the Ylopo LCA drip, right? You can put a tag at the end of that campaign, call it LCA drip, set up LCA drip for your trigger, and then the condition could be to apply the Ylopo LCA drip action plan. So like what I've done is I have an initial action plan. I took that LCA drip, went onto my Ylopo blog site, grabbed a bunch of those blog posts, made that drip even longer. So when a lead first comes in, even if they don't answer my initial 14-day campaign, they're getting items of value for like a 3-year period of time. And then the final thing you can do is market trends emails, right? So if you're using auto tagging in Follow Up Boss, basically what that does is it tags the lead with the city or the zip code they're in, right? And with the market trends tool, that link is evergreen. So something you can do is, so let's say somebody comes in, they click a property in Irvine, they get tagged Irvine, for example, right? You could have an action plan, which is like Irvine market trends. So maybe you have 10 emails going out every 30 days with your market trends link, all worded a little bit differently. So that person's monthly getting market updates for every city that they ever clicked in. So those are a few of my favorite use cases for automations. If you guys scan that QR code, just fill out a little form, and you'll actually get access to all of my automations, some action plans as well. And I know this was a lot of information, so if you guys ever need help with automations, I teach this stuff every single day during office hours, which I'll share a QR code here in a second. But every day we have office hours. They're from 9 a.m. Pacific time for an hour a day, right? So Mondays we go over scripting and smart lists. Tuesdays we go over all the branded sites tools. Wednesday you have Livia, me, Barry, Gabe. We're all on there helping you guys out. Thursdays we cover imports, and on Fridays we do FUB Friday. So all things Follow Up Boss, we talk about every Friday during these sessions. So typically what I do, I'll take the first 30 minutes or so, teach a little bit of something, and then the second half, I'll just leave it open to whatever questions you guys have. So whether you want to learn more about automations, lead flow, how to best use your Follow Up Boss, feel free to join us in those sessions. I'd be happy to see you all there. So thanks, everybody.